want to talk about our favorite tool, JSXGraph, and how we could. The challenge I had was how to make it usable in Visual Studio. The problem is that JSXGraph has these 120 elements, and they're all overloads of the board create constructor. And we've all seen code like this. But there's really two problems with it. The first one is that the workflow is exactly what we did 20 years ago. We have a text editor up, we have our API reference up, and we have a browser up, typically with a debugger. You guys have all seen this, you're all doing this. Dr. Flenner on Tuesday actually showed us how to run the debugger in this old-fashioned three-window approach to development. And this is not different than what I was doing 50 years ago on PDP-11s. So that's the first problem. And the second problem, and this is again from before, from last week's documentation, our minimal example is terrifying. Okay, it is absolutely totally beyond what a beginner JavaScript programmer can do. I mean, rationally, somebody coming to the screen would leave. Okay, the new one actually isn't any better because it's the same code, but now we have a dozen different choices that you probably don't understand that we have to make before we can pick our minimal example. So we've created a huge barrier for people who want to get into JSXGraph. So I went at it, and this is the second version, but here's my approach to fixing this. I went through and created wrapper functions, right? Basically, instead of board.create, I have this object. Instead of board, I call it TSX, but I could have called it board. Board.text, tsx.point, tsx.segment. Okay. Make the code a little bit easier to approach, right? It doesn't look as wordy, right? But now I can organize the calls correctly, and I converted it to TypeScript. Okay, TypeScript is JavaScript. Okay, every valid JavaScript program is a valid TypeScript program, given the correct level of permission or permissiveness in your error handling, right? But the value, you see that my cursor works? Great. The value is that I get to put in typed parameters and typed attributes. The attributes for point are not the same as the attributes for line, right? When I create a point, it returns, I have a typed return. VSCode now knows that whatever I assign the point to is of type point. And as a bonus, I got to modify the defaults a little bit. I'll talk about that in a little bit later. Okay, so I created a wrapper to do this in TypeScript. I kept the original JSX coding style. It's exactly what you expect. If you're familiar with JSXGraph, you're not going to have any trouble using this. If you look at the point, I don't need the string at the beginning anymore because it's a point. The array only contains one element, so it's the first parameter. It's what I call a point address. I could be in this case, it's just an array of numbers. And then I've got my attributes. Some JSXGraph calls have multiple signatures. I handle them correctly because TypeScript has multiple signatures. Okay, but remember, when I say TypeScript, it's exactly JavaScript. This is exactly JavaScript. The only difference in TypeScript is this thing I showed earlier, where you can put the types in, and it's optional. So when I'm fixing things up, there were a couple of things I just hated. Creating a rotation element. I don't know if anyone's done it. I think, sorry, we had a presentation earlier this week that used a rotation. It's a terrible, complicated thing. So I simplified it. I have a rotate function. It takes the rotation and the point that you're rotating around. And underneath, it's just a call to board create. I take the second call and turn it into the first call. Here's what you get when you do that. Suddenly, VS Code can give you help. It can give you your options and your completions. If you've been using VS Code, and I suspect most of you have, right? As you're typing, all this random garbage comes up, and it's not related to your JSX program. It's whatever VS Code thinks they can throw at you because you've given them no clue with create element. You've given them no clue as to what elements you're working on. So if you start typing in VS Code, TSX dot, this is what the first option you're going to see. And you can go explore it. And I've stripped out some help so that you can see what it is that you're getting. I have context help. It comes up, basically it's the same help, but it comes up at different points. If you hover your cursor over a point, or actually over A now, because VS Code knows that A is a TSX point, but if you hover over a point, this is the information you get. It's got the signature, right? It's got parameter attributes, returns a point. It's got a couple of examples. It's a pretty good way to edit. It's a lot more helpful than what we're getting now. Same thing with attributes. You start typing in an attribute, and it gives you, in this case, all the attributes, all the plausible attributes that have a D, and then some stuff at the bottom. Okay? The attribute you want is there, but if you type in dash scale and you want a dash scale, you're going to throw an error. I don't have the debugger in the browser open anymore because I don't make those mistakes. Completions also expose the methods and fields. We don't use them a lot, but they're absolutely amazing. There's a very rich architecture of methods and fields in JSXGraph. We're just used to the attributes. It's all there. You start typing. By the way, if you just say P dot and Control I, it'll give you all the valid ones. I started this so I could display something. Control I is the magic. But in the last 2 months, JSXGraph has assigned Control I to artificial intelligence, to their their copilot. So I've configured my editor to Control J, but that's not something you have to do. Just you'll know it. Once you've done this typing, VS Code can help, or at least TypeScript and VS Code can help you find errors that you would spend hours debugging. When you create a line, what comes first? Well, the signature helps, but if you type it wrong, right, VS Code right away will say you cannot put a circle as the first element of a line. Okay, VS Code also has the syntax checking, the type checking, the linting, the refactoring, the pretty. We saw that it's got all these tools that we don't use because JSXGraph doesn't support them. One of the things you can do when you write a wrapper is change the environment, and I decided to do that. So right now we have this very complicated 3D environment. I wanted something simpler. So I just said 3D is going to look exactly like 2D. Okay, you say TSX point, you get a 2D point. You say TSX point 3D, you get a 3D point. Okay, and they just show up. There's none of this, there's no view, there's no, right? Now there's a wrapper involved, right? Underneath there obviously is a view, but I said, we don't need to do this. And most of the elements that you're familiar with have both a 2D and a 3D. Well, Glider doesn't. I made that one up. Glider is sort of hidden somewhere in 0.3D, but we'll fix that up. Dr. Flenner showed you how to use the debugger in the browser. It's easier to use the debugger in VS Code. Okay, it's basically the same tools. JavaScript and TypeScript are the same. If you just want to use JavaScript, VS Code will still help you. It won't give you a lot of the error checking, but it will help you with all the completions and all the, it's worth doing. So just load the t.ds or d.ts file into your environment that you can get from my package, and you'll get help in JavaScript as well. But I encourage you to look at TypeScript. Okay, we're going to change directions a bit. Alfred said something beautiful in his lecture on the first day. He gave the beginner JavaScript lecture. And after digging in for about 20 minutes, he said, this is a little bit complicated. It shouldn't be. So here is a ready-to-go TSX environment, including a web browser, with all the enhancements that I've put in 30 seconds. But it's not perfect. You still have to know about Git and Node and NPN. You have to know about GitHub and stuff like that. If you're a first-year student showing up and saying, I want to write some JavaScript, what can I do some drawings in JavaScript with? This isn't the right tool for you. So this, I think, is the right tool for you. And at this point, I'm going to stop for a second. And if you have a desktop, I'd like you to go to this location and try out what I've just been talking about. Okay, here, I'll put that into the chat window. I can't do that. I've lost the chat window. No, it has to be here. Chat. Okay, so I've put the link there, or you can just type it in. Okay, I'd like you to go to this site. How do I get rid of this? I'd like you to go to the site and try something, and try whatever. Sorry, right? Create a point and a line. Create a circle. Try some JSX code that you've never used before. Just explore. Type slowly and see how the completions work. This is JSX. This is VS Code, by the way. This is called the Monaco editor, and it's the baby brother of VS Code. It's the engine that VS Code is written on. So for all the control codes that you know in VS Code will work here. Dragging stuff up and down. There's a little help with the editor keys, but I hope you're all there trying stuff and not looking at this screen anymore. Okay. Try something in 3D. I suspect a lot of you haven't used 3D yet. Create a line in 3D. Well, you need 2 points. And I'm going to be asking for your comments. Maybe I should just stop talking and let you guys, does anyone have any comments? Come back, tell us how you're doing. Has anyone been able to create an element yet? Excellent. It's even better in real VS Code. But this is my zero startup. Get started in JSX. I want a high school student who's taken 2 lectures in JavaScript to be able to sit down and make a circle. All right, there's some images in there. Try a tsx.image, right? Open the bracket and hit Control I, which is the standard VS Code. Show me the options, and throw an image up. Okay, because this is a playful tool. It's for students. It's for um, okay, but it's also an alternative to. Hang on, I'm going to have to get this. Where did I put it? Um, I'm going to send you a link if I can. Um, Here's a link to a playground that I created and shared. Okay, it's just a way of saying. Sorry, I put it into the chat on the side of the Zoom call. Um, okay, and it's the iterated icosahedron, but you can, if I wanted to share it with a fellow student, if I wanted to show off my awesomeness, I would just pop it into the forum and say, hey, what do you think? Are people coming back? I don't know what the. Okay, two or three more slides, and then let's open this up for questions because I'm sure there's going to be a few. Um, the All right, so what I wanted was a playful space. I've put in the space icons, right? This is a little illustration of why Mars looks like it goes into retrograde, and it's simply a matter of whether I could share it. I have to find the right. But in fact, here's the script for it. Can I grab this? Not easily. Yes, share, copy. Um, yeah. Put it into. Okay, so that's the why is there retrograde behavior? Okay, can we go on? I will come back. We'll ask questions. There'll be a little time to play with this at the end of the lecture. I still have a few minutes. Next thing I started doing was writing a textbook, and the textbook embeds this tool, right, and the output, but also has a, it's a basic JSX graph book written in the simplified JSX graph. Uh, it assumes you know TypeScript or JavaScript. It doesn't really care and goes from there. In my thinking, this is for an instructor who is helping people with JSX graph. It's or a grad student who wants to create some graphs for his thesis. It's a fun, interesting, easy way to get in. And you can try this textbook if you want. It's at Cheese and Crackers, the site where but I will warn you, the Moodle is extremely slow. It's on my ISP, but because no one ever uses it, the cache is always empty. And Moodle is huge. It takes a long time to compile. Okay, when you start it, it's got a half dozen, well, 8 chapters or 9 chapters, I guess. The last 2 are still heavily under construction and not really loaded. But the introduction, points, lines, animating, I think they're in pretty good shape. You'll see how I'm doing stuff. So we now have an easy to access tool and an easy to access textbook for it. So I'm hoping that you'll try it. What I'm really hoping is that we can include this in the JSXGraph project. I have been, the reason I traveled to Germany was to say, guys, we can do better. And I brought them version 1 of this tool. This is version 2. In some ways, version 1 was better. In some ways, this is better. I'm hoping to start a discussion of what's the best way to go. And that's kind of the end of my presentation, but I have one more slide that I want to leave up, and then maybe we can ask some questions. Why did I do all of this? It was because I was trying to write a JavaScript course for high school students, and I couldn't find an environment to program in. I thought it would be fun to say, let's write some games. There are any number of books that say, write games for HTML, but they're awful. I have a half dozen of them. They are awful. But writing games for HTML is awful. So I said, okay, let's look at 3JS, the 3-dimensional, but frankly, you need a graduate degree in, to get past the first create an element, create the material, wrap the material on the element. JSXGraph says, here's a point, here's a line, let's go. But more than that, JSXGraph is math. It leads students to math. The very first thing you learn with JSXGraph is the Cartesian plane. So, and it's real programming. It's not Scratch. It's not Alice. It's not. So I wanted Mindstorms. I wanted logo for high school students. And Papert was insistent we need a low floor and a high ceiling. But what we were missing in JSXGraph was the low floor.